Welcome to the Addis Fortune Newsroom. I mean, imagine this for a second. You sign a legally binding fixed-price contract to buy a home, right?
Right.
You put your hard-earned money down, and you wait. You wait 10 whole years while the developer just delays and delays. And then a Supreme Court judge looks at you and says, yeah, that contract, it doesn't actually matter anymore.
Wow. Yeah, just wiped away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And simply because the cost of cement got too high. Today, we are taking a deep dive into an economy that is moving so incredibly fast, it is quite literally outrunning its own laws.
It really is. And, when you trace the lines from the federal level down to the municipal level and eventually to the everyday consumer like that home buyer, you start to see that a broken real estate contract isn't just an isolated piece of bad luck.
No, it's a symptom.
Exactly. It is a symptom of a much larger structural friction. We are seeing just sheer unprecedented economic ambition colliding with bureaucratic machinery that is, well, it's simply struggling to catch up.
Yeah, and we're bringing you this deep dive straight from our desks here at Addis Fortune. We've pulled together the most critical front-page stories from this week's edition to figure out exactly how these massive macroeconomic shifts are altering the ground beneath your feet.
Because whether you are trying to navigate the housing market or figure out school tuition or just wondering why a new airport is being built in your region, understanding this gap between ambition and infrastructure is really the key to navigating today's economy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the city's ledgers. The Addis ABA economic audit just came out.
Oh, this was a wild one.
Right. So the city administration mobilized 233.7 billion birr for the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year, which is huge.
Massive.
But then Auditor General Amente Machalu found that the city's books are just an absolute maze of missing accountability. I mean, we are looking at over 2 billion birr in uncollected receivables and nearly 2 billion in payables to third parties across dozens of agencies.
The scale of the budget mobilization is, it's a massive achievement, obviously, but it completely exposes the fragility of the accounting infrastructure underneath it,
Yeah.
The city is pulling in more revenue than ever before to fund these hyper-growth initiatives, but the administrative capacity to actually track, reconcile, and deploy those funds, it just hasn't evolved at the same pace.
And the Addis Ababa Roads Authority is like the clearest example of this breakdown.
Definitely.
The auditors found 4.2 billion birr
Yeah.
in uncollected receivables just sitting there. But what really stood out to me was how the reconciliation systems operated.
Right. The mixing of the accounts.
Yeah. The auditors reported that accounts were mixed to the point where individual creditors and debtors couldn't even be distinguished. How does a modern municipal authority lose track of who owes them money and who they owe money to on a scale of billions of birr?
Well, it really comes down to the underlying mechanics of how they're recording these transactions. I mean, for decades, many of these bureaus have relied on older, cash-based, single-entry accounting systems.
Single entry, so
Like a personal checkbook, basically. You're just keeping a running list of cash coming in and cash going out.
okay, I see.
There is no built-in mechanism to link a specific outflow of cash to a corresponding liability or asset in real time. So when the Roads Authority advances funds for a massive infrastructure project, and those advances are backed by bank guarantees, the transaction gets logged.
Right.
But without distinct, standardized codes linking that specific advance to a specific contractor's ongoing ledger, the money just becomes a number in a massive pool of unreconciled data.
I mean, it's like a massive shared apartment where 166 roommates are mixing up the grocery money in a giant jar.
That is a perfect way to put it.
The authority's director general did defend this, though.
Yeah.
They said they're still clearing old debts from when the city shifted from manual to automated systems years ago.
Right, the transition period.
Yeah. But that lack of visibility is bleeding out of the finance department and causing real-world, physical risks. The audit flagged factories discharging toxic liquid waste while hitting noise levels of 122 decibels.
Which is insanely loud.
It's like standing next to a thunderclap. And the Gandhi Memorial Hospital was found storing hazardous waste for up to 10 days, completely ignoring the 3-day legal limit.
Wow.
Plus, the Health Bureau made 100% upfront payments for medical equipment. The Bureau had argued the supplier legally required that upfront payment, but an auditor looking at a 100% advance payment just sees a massive vulnerability for public funds.
Yeah, that's a red flag in any audit. And the city administration's proposed solution to all this administrative chaos is it's a draft directive from the Finance Bureau designed to force all municipal payments onto a digital platform.
Okay, a digital fix.
Right. They want to eliminate physical paperwork and cash transactions entirely for municipal salaries, supplier payments, and even daily transport allowances.
The claim is that going fully digital will cut administrative bottlenecks and reduce corruption by up to 90%.
That's the pitch.
But if you have an underlying accounting system that can't distinguish between individual creditors, forcing everyone to use a digital portal seems like forcing all the traffic from a 10-lane highway through a single toll booth. You aren't fixing the traffic, you're just digitizing the choke point.
Exactly, and that is the core of the criticism coming from cybersecurity experts like Brooke Cabrez. The directive actually mandates CBE as the sole banking channel for all of these municipal transactions.
So a monopoly.
Exactly. By establishing that monopoly, the city is cutting out other commercial banks and payment providers. This stifles competition, obviously, but more importantly, it raises interchange costs for anyone outside that specific banking ecosystem who needs to interact with the city.
Not to mention the sheer load on the servers. I mean, if every single burr the city spends has to flow through one centralized system, what happens when it goes down?
You have a massive single point of failure. If the human capacity to manage the software and the cybersecurity infrastructure aren't aggressively upgraded beforehand, a centralized portal can be exploited. Or it could simply stall under the volume of Addis Abeba's daily financial activity.
Which is massive.
Right. Brooke and audit experts like Tilahun Gurma, they argue that the real fix isn't just changing how the money is transferred.
So what is the fix?
It requires standardizing the enterprise resource planning systems across all 166 audited agencies. That means moving away from that single entry cash accounting we talked about and adopting International Public Sector Accounting Standards, or IPSAS.
Let's break down why IPSAS actually matters here. Because it sounds like dry accounting jargon, but it's really the difference between losing 4.2 billion burr and knowing exactly where it is.
Yeah, it really is. IPSAS operates on accrual-based double entry accounting. Under this system, every financial event requires 2 entries, a credit and a debit that must perfectly balance. So, if the Health Bureau makes an upfront payment for medical equipment, IPSAS requires them to simultaneously record the decrease in cash and the increase in a specific coded prepaid asset account.
So you can't just lose it in a general ledger.
Exactly. You can't, because the books literally will not balance unless every single burr is attached to a specific tracked entity. It forces real-time accountability.
You know, when you look at the city's inability to manage its internal ledgers and properly track supply lines, it sheds a lot of light on why the physical construction of the city is facing such extreme bottlenecks.
It really does.
The government's macro-level struggles with supply chains and inflation bleed directly into the private sector. The cement market right now is the perfect microcosm of this dynamic.
It's fascinating because the federal government is dedicating roughly 30% of the upcoming national budget to priority sectors like road construction, energy, and urban development.
Which is a massive infrastructure push.
Right, that push is the engine driving the demand. But the supply chain meant to feed that engine is severely distorted.
Yeah, we covered the story of Fikramariam Wandamu, a retailer in the JMO area. He says trading cement has turned into outright gambling.
Gambling, wow.
The price of a quintal can swing by 150 burr in a single day. He has no idea what a sack will cost by the time a customer walks into his shop.
That's wild.
But when you look upstream at the factories, massive plants like Lemmy National Cement Factory, which, by the way, supplies half the country's cement, and Dangote, they're operating at near full capacity.
Huh.
So if the factories are producing, why is the end retailer gambling on the price?
Because legitimate small-scale traders are being systematically squeezed out by a network of intermediaries.
Middlemen.
Exactly. These powerful middlemen buy in massive bulk directly from the factory gates, but instead of distributing the cement to the market, they warehouse it.
Oh, they hold it back.
Right. By holding back the supply, they create an artificial scarcity in the localized market, which drives the price way up. Once the market is desperate, they release the cement at just exorbitant markups.
I mean, the factories do have genuine production hurdles to factor in too, specifically fuel shortages. Fuel accounts for nearly half of their production costs, and relying on expensive imported raw materials creates a very high baseline cost before the intermediaries even touch the product.
That's true. And Samuel G. Yohannes, a lecturer at Addis Ababa University, points out that the factories have alternative options to stabilize those baseline costs.
Like what?
Well, in Brazil and India, cement plants have successfully integrated industrial waste into their kilns to reduce their reliance on imported fossil fuels.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And until local factories adopt similar alternative fuel strategies, they're going to remain highly vulnerable to global fuel price shocks, which really just gives the intermediaries more cover to manipulate the final price.
And this brings us back to the scenario we started with. The chaos of this supply chain doesn't just hurt the small retailers, it absolutely devastates the end consumer. Let's look at that Flintstone Home Supreme Court ruling, because this case fundamentally tests what a contract actually means in a hyperinflationary environment.
It really is a landmark case. So 10 years ago, over 700 buyers signed fixed-price contracts for flats with Flintstone homes. The agreed-upon rate was around 13,700 birr per square meter.
Okay.
As the years passed, the developer failed to deliver the homes. Flintstone Homes argued that an inflation rate of 500%, combined with the soaring costs of materials like cement and steel, which we just talked about, made it mathematically impossible to finish the construction at the 2014 price point.
So they just asked for more money.
A lot more. They demanded the buyers pay 24,500 birr per square meter to see the project finish.
Which is almost double. And the buyers naturally refused, right?
Yeah.
Citing their fixed price contracts. And they took it through arbitration all the way to the Cassation Division of the Federal Supreme Court.
And the court ultimately sided with the developer.
Which is just crazy to me.
They ruled that Flintstone Homes cannot be forced to build the houses at the original price. The buyers were offered refunds, but the refunds were pegged to the developer's old top-up rate of 10,800 birr a square meter.
Completely ignoring today's actual market rate, which the buyers argued is closer to 99,000 birr a square meter.
Exactly. So you have people like Aklog Gurma, a pensioner who bought a flat for her daughter, who waited 10 years only to get a refund that won't even cover a fraction of a comparable home today.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because I really struggle with the legal logic here. I have to side with the buyers. If a developer can legally walk away from a fixed price contract simply because the materials got too expensive, it destroys the foundational concept of contract law in the real estate market.
It definitely sets a precedent.
Right. I mean, the whole point of a fixed price is that the developer assumes the risk of market fluctuations. If the price of cement had dropped 50%, the developer wouldn't have offered the buyers a discount. Why do they get to void the contract when the map goes against them?
You're not alone in that. Legal experts, like former Judge Temesgen Gerbre-Selassie, share that exact concern. They argue that this ruling effectively strips away consumer protection. But we have to look at the cold macroeconomic reality the court was facing.
Which is what exactly?
Let's play out the alternative. If the Supreme Court strictly enforces the contract and orders the developer to build the remaining homes at a 500% loss, the developer immediately declares bankruptcy.
Okay.
The company liquidates, the half-built construction site is abandoned, and the buyers receive absolutely nothing. The court is making a brutal calculation.
So the law is essentially sacrificing consumer protection to accommodate the realities of inflation.
Yes, unfortunately. The formal legal system cannot absorb the shock of hypergrowth and supply chain manipulation, so the shock is passed down the ladder until it lands entirely on the shoulders of the everyday citizen. The buyer assumes the ultimate financial risk of the country's economic volatility.
While everyday citizens are forced to absorb the costs of this friction, the government's own entities are finding ways to operate outside the standard rulebook entirely.
Oh, definitely.
Which brings us to the Ethiopian Airlines Group, or EAG. The Auditor General's report on their infrastructure expansion is a fascinating contrast to the municipal audits we discussed earlier.
The scale of what EAG is doing is just staggering. They are executing one of the most aggressive infrastructure expansions on the continent. I mean, they recently opened their 25th airport.
Wow.
And they are currently building a new $12.6 billion international airport in Bishoftu, which is designed to handle up to 110 million passengers annually by 2030.
But the Auditor General found that the basic compliance paperwork for this massive expansion is practically non-existent. Out of their network, 22 airports lack master plans.
Don't claim to.
Right. 15 lack land use plans. Some of the newly built airports, specifically in Arba Minch and Gambella, don't even have property title deeds.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
And there are tangible safety hazards resulting from this rushed expansion, like missing perimeter fences at Lalabella and Nekvanti that have actually allowed livestock to wander directly onto the runways.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you build a multi-billion-dollar aviation network without securing the property deeds for the land you're pouring concrete on? It's like laying the tracks for a high-speed bullet train while simultaneously forgetting to draw the blueprints for the stations.
Well, the CEO of the airline, Mesfin Tasu, maintains that existing site plans serve as adequate master plans and that they are securing the formal deeds as the airports grow and regional needs become clearer. But aviation consultant Yonatan Menkir offers a much deeper economic logic behind this strategy.
What's his take?
He argues that applying standard bureaucratic audits to EAG fundamentally misunderstands what the airline is actually designed to do.
But international civil aviation organization standards exist for a reason. Rules are rules, especially when it comes to aviation safety in public land.
True, very true. But Yonatan points out that EAG functions as a national developmental tool. Their mandate isn't just to run a profitable route. It is to build infrastructure that seeds future regional growth.
Okay, so a longer play.
Right. When EAG decides to build an airport in Gambella, they know the route might operate at a loss on day one. But by establishing that physical connection, they create accessibility that draws in future trade, tourism, and federal investment. If they wait for local municipalities to finalize zoning laws, clear bureaucratic red tape, and issue perfect title deeds, the project could be delayed by a decade. So the economic strategy is to pour the concrete now, establish the route, and let the paperwork catch up to the reality on the ground.
It is a calculated gamble. The Auditor General represents the necessity of safeguarding public money and maintaining international compliance. But the aviation experts are arguing that if you force a developmental engine to move at the speed of local bureaucracy, you suffocate the regional growth before it can even start.
Exactly. It is the ultimate expression of hypergrowth outrunning the rulebook, just happening at 30,000 feet.
We've seen this theme play out across city budgets, the cement supply chain, real estate contracts, and national aviation infrastructure. Institutions and developers are constantly finding workarounds or simply ignoring the rules to survive the pressure of a booming economy.
But what happens when everyday citizens organize and fight back against these institutional workarounds?
Yes, that brings us to our final story from Addis Fortune about Sanford International School, which is an elite institution that has been operating in Addis Ababa since 1947.
So the school wanted to restructure its tuition fees. They took their lower-paying Ethiopian students, who are categorized as C1 and C2, and attempted to move them into the highest tuition bracket, C4, which is denominated in foreign currency.
But they were very careful not to call it a fee increase.
Oh, very careful.
They labeled the move as harmonization, arguing that because all students receive the exact same educational resources, standardizing the fees was merely harmonizing the system, not hiking the tuition.
Right, it was a very strategic redefinition to basically bypass the regulations governing arbitrary fee hikes. And they actually had the backing of the Ministry of Education.
Which is wild.
Yeah. The ministry stepped in and issued an amendment to a directive that specifically legally validated this distinction between a tuition increase and harmonization.
But the parents didn't accept the new vocabulary. 132 parents organized and sued. And they didn't just sue the school, they targeted the ministry's intervention.
Which is a bold move.
The parents argued that the Ministry of Education bypassed formal legal procedures, skipped the required public review process, and lacked the actual legal mandate to amend the directive in that manner. And the Federal High Court agreed with them.
They did.
A 3-judge panel struck down the amendment entirely, ruling that the ministry had acted beyond its legal authority.
It is a massive victory for those 132 parents, but the ripple effects go much further. I mean, the ruling effectively strips international schools across the city, including Stanford and Flipper, of the legal cover they were relying on to raise fees through reclassification.
So what does this all mean? With the directive struck down, it seems like we are left with a massive regulatory vacuum. The parents won the battle, but where does the war over tuition fees go from here?
Well, the Ministry of Education is now forced back to square one. If they want to regulate these fees, they have to draft a new law using proper, transparent parliamentary procedures, which takes significant time.
Right.
But the larger insight here is the role of the judiciary. In the Flintstone Homes case, we saw the courts adapt the law to favor macroeconomic reality over the consumer.
Right, letting the developer out of the contract.
Exactly. But here, the judiciary acted as a strict, unyielding check on administrative overreach. It proves that when government ministries attempt to move faster than the law allows to bail out private institutions, an organized citizenry can actually force the system to hit the brakes. Simply inventing a new word for a fee hike will not survive legal scrutiny if the public is willing to test it in court.
It is a phenomenal example of organized pushback in an environment that often feels completely out of the citizens' control. We have spent this deep dive inside the pages of Addis Fortune, unpacking the realities of a city sprinting into the future. The growing pains are severe and they are everywhere.
Everywhere you look.
We see builders pouring concrete for national airports without property deeds because waiting for the planners means losing the momentum. We see everyday home buyers having their fixed-price contracts legally voided because the cost of cement changes by the hour. We see elite schools inventing new terminology with the backing of federal ministries to bypass regulations and hike fees. Ethiopia is experiencing an economy that is simply moving too fast for its own frameworks to contain.
And exploring these stories leaves us with a vital question about the future of the social contract. I mean, we have seen formal contracts fail to protect a pensioner buying a flat. We have seen municipal audits uncover billions in completely untraceable public funds due to outdated systems.
Is lost in the ledger.
Exactly. We have seen federal regulations bypassed or rewritten overnight. If these traditional formal legal frameworks continuously buckle under the immense pressure of inflation and hypergrowth, will citizens eventually be forced to abandon them?
Wow, that's a heavy thought.
Will we see a future where society has to rely on entirely new, informal systems of trust, community enforcement, and alternative dispute resolution just to survive the economic boom?
When the paper contract no longer holds up in court, figuring out what replaces that paper is the most important challenge ahead. Thank you for joining us in the newsroom for this deep dive into the source material. By unpacking the mechanics behind these headlines, you are now equipped with the context to truly understand the forces shaping Ethiopia's economic engine. On behalf of the entire team at Addis Fortune, thank you for listening and goodbye.